Good afternoon. Distinguished guests, friends of the Rīga conference community. Yesterday's heartbreaking news caught attention of all of us, and unfortunately, diplomat Ojārs Eriks Kalniņš passed away yesterday. And he was not only diplomat and only public opinion maker, he was very kind and very friendly person. He was founder of the Latvian Transatlantic Organization. He was chair of the board of this organization and was with us during all Riga conferences all those years. I invite you to join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Dear friends, one uncertain year filled with uncertainties is in relation to pandemics, but also in relation to politics. But one is certain, and it is Riga conference. Whatever troubles are around the world, the Riga conference takes place, either in hybrid format or in person. This year we are having 84 speakers. Some of them are here in the hall, some are there somewhere at their computers. They are representatives of 25 countries. We are going to have 14 panels, 5 side events, and Future Leaders Forum. 6 policy briefs have been produced, and also an information platform called Secure Baltics is created, and everything what you are going to discuss here will remain in this information hub for next conferences to debate. So, the world is filled with a lot of issues. We will start with Europe, and we will end up with Afghanistan, and we already had a discussion on Indo-Pacific region. We are going to travel 360. What we need patience, we need courage, and we need a lot of ideas which could be passed over to policymakers, to experts, and to younger generation. I wish you and all of us good luck, very intensive and rich conversations, and hopefully in the end we will say that we contributed to the work which is done by politicians and by international community. Good luck, and I pass the floor to Edward Lucas for further discussions. Please, Edward.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Janetta, and thank you to the organizers. I feel as if my social life, as well as my political life and my professional life, is all restarting. Being back in a room with lots of people, many good friends from over many years, is terrific. So thank you to the organizers for pushing ahead through all the difficulties to make this conference happen. We're all really grateful. And it's also a real honor to have the Prime Ministers of Estonia and Latvia here on the panel. I'm sure over the last 18 months, we've really been missing the chance to have face-to-face interactions with our decision makers, and they're going to give some opening thoughts, and then maybe we'll have a short discussion where I'll pose some questions. And I can't tell you how busy the last year and a half has been. We've got no shortage of things to discuss, whether it's the Afghanistan withdrawal, the Zapad exercises in Belarus, the weaponized migration, the crackdown in Belarus and the terrible suffering of our friends there, the tensions within the European Union, the new Biden administration. We could have 3 days of discussions on just those, and we wouldn't finish it. But I'm going to start by asking the Prime Minister of the Republic of Latvia to kick us off. Christian, it's great seeing you again. And then after that, we'll turn to Kaja Kallas for her opening remarks. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Do I sit? Do I stand?
I think less movement is good in COVID times, so stay seated.
Okay. Thank you very much. It really is a great pleasure to be here, and even in these times to be able to address a live auditorium. The way I see it, I think Ms. Ozolin also touched it off. We live in challenging times indeed. If these words were ever true, they're true today. I took a note of, I counted 8 small challenges. I'll just mention them in brief. So one is, of course, the COVID pandemic. It's not gone in the world, certainly in the Baltics right now. we are experiencing our biggest wave to date. The challenge is convincing enough people who are not vaccinated to become vaccinated. In our region, vaccine hesitancy has been unfortunately quite large, and this is causing difficulties also among the healthcare sector, but working step by step, this will be overcome. And this has changed a lot in the world. Some things will end up being for the better in terms of efficiency of how companies are working, certainly in terms of efficiency of government. We are completely, the final vestiges of paper are now fully gone, so there are some silver linings in that as well. We have our near neighbor, Ukraine. And the fact of the Crimean annexation by Russia, the ongoing aggression in the Donbas region, this has not changed at all. That challenge remains and has the potential to flare up into an ever larger conflict. We have our southerly neighbor, Belarus. Belarus that, in the latest round with the elections, which were obviously not legitimate, then with the popular uprising, the massive suppression against their own people. Then in the summer we had the grounding of the plane, and now we have, if anyone is still not clear, what does a hybrid attack look like? Well, we have one which is ongoing, even as we speak, on the Latvian-Lithuanian-Belarusian border, where Belarus is organizing people coming from Baghdad and other places, and trying to physically encourage them to illegally cross into the European Union. Democracies have a challenge against autocracies, but we have a right and an obligation to defend ourselves, and we will do this. So in Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, we have effectively closed our border to such illegal activity, and we will keep them closed and not succumb to the hybrid attack from Belarus. We have energy price spikes going on right now. Rather complex reasons, all conflating at the same time. This has the potential of creating some social or political unrest, but it also shows the EU's vulnerability, our overly high dependence on gas and our overly high dependence on one gas producer, Russia. And Russia is currently in the power position of a potential supply manipulator, where President Putin is saying, if you want supplies, have good relations, implying if you don't have good relations, you will not have supplies. There's also a secondary issue, not less important, that this is coinciding with the move towards green and renewable energies. And as we move away from coal, we move more into gas, and there will be more and more voices around Europe that will raise the question, is climate policy completely well thought out from an economic point of view? Then we have Russia as a general threat, already mentioned in terms of energy and the Ukraine, and as a strong supporter of Belarus. The growing autocracy in Russia, the complete silencing of opposition. Navalny is in prison like a crow that you keep for others to see what happens if you raise your voice. The complete intimidation of the opposition is a real problem. Then we have ongoing cyber attacks and disinformation around the world. It's not only in our region. And it's very clear that Russia is on some sort of offensive. And it's our job to understand that and to defend and counter. Then we have the challenge of China. This is a challenge for the entire world, not less for the European Union. Is China a rival, a competitor? Is it a partner? Are they a threat? Probably all of the above. But the European Union needs a coherent China policy. Latvia is one of the members of the so-called 17 plus 1. I think the true model is 27 plus 1. Not groups or individual European countries, but Europe as a whole addressing these challenges. Then we have the somewhat strained relations right now with the US. It started in the last government administration, but now with the latest two events, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, from Kabul, which many allies did not fully appreciate the timeliness of it. And we also have the AUKUS agreement between the US and Australia, which caught France a little off guard. There's no question that the US is remain committed to NATO and to Europe, but we need to work on this EU-US relationship to not let some misunderstandings get in the way of the good cooperation. And then finally, it's what I would call the uncertain role of the European Union as it sees itself in the world. So if you look around the world, you have the US, which is an economic powerhouse and a military powerhouse. You have China, which is an economic powerhouse, and quite clearly, ever more, as they're also intimidating Taiwan, a growing military powerhouse. And then you have the European Union. No question that we are an economic powerhouse. But does anyone really think that the EU right now is a military powerhouse? Can we project power if we wanted to in the Indo-Pacific or anywhere else around the world? And I think this is one of the big questions of our time. Where is Europe heading? So I'll give my 2 cents. In terms of security and defense, for Europe, NATO is and must remain the cornerstone of our strategy and policy. But within the NATO strategy, a stronger and more coherent European Union has its place, because a stronger and more coherent European Union can address the issue of China, the issue of Russia, the issue of Belarus, how to better US-European relations. And this is what a country such as Latvia is very interested in, is strong friends and neighbors within our treaty alliances, not in contradiction, Europe or NATO, but Europe as an important partner in NATO that needs to strengthen itself. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Prime Minister, for that really comprehensive and insightful tour of perhaps just some of the problems that we're facing. I'm sure we could have listed more. And I'm going straight over to Prime Minister Kallas of Estonia. I think we're all so glad to see the momentum and the decisiveness that you've brought to Estonia's leadership since your government came in. We've missed Estonia a bit over some of the previous years, and I feel now Estonia's back, and your idea of trusted connectivity was a really good hallmark for the 3Cs presidency when you had that, and for other things going forward. So I know your Latvian colleague has covered a lot of ground, but perhaps you could give us your distinctive Estonian perspective on those issues and maybe some others as well.
I don't want to disappoint my advisors who have helped me to prepare the speech, so I will still read the speech and then we go to the debate, if that's fine. So I will use then I will be a bit taller. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to be here in Riga today, and I'm also happy that these events still take place. So we live in times of multiple crises and transformations. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed several troubling global trends, including increasing authoritarianism, economic protectionism, and threats to human rights and civil liberties. According to Freedom House, freedom has been in decline for the past 16 years. And COVID-19 pandemic has further worsened this decline. At the same time, international security environment has been growing increasingly tense. We see constant ongoing attacks that are more complex and are more interconnected. For example, the cyber and influence operations against the United States or other Western democracies have escalated. Cyber attacks, use of disruptive technologies, spread of disinformation are blurring the boundaries of peace and conflict. Attacks on democratic institutions are on the rise. Dictators are interested in disrupting free and open societies. They see liberal democracy as dangerous ideology that threatens their power and needs to be defeated. For achieving their goals, they are willing to deploy corruption, propaganda, and even aggression. So let me emphasize a few points regarding the way forward. First, our security is determined by the unity and also the health of our democracies. World order is one of those things people don't think about until it's gone. The same can be said for freedom, but it's also true for democracy. We tend to take it for granted. Our democracies are not only challenged by the outside influence, as Chancellor Merkel has recently said, democracy has to be protected, but people should also respect democracy itself. Hence, the important question of our times: how can democracies deliver real results for people in a rapidly changing world? How to keep people's faith in democracy? Second, democracies must come together and decide how to unite the free world via safe and digital global infrastructure. Digital technology forms a backbone of every infrastructure we build on the 21st century. Modern connections, be it bridges, highways, or energy flows, rely on technology and data. This means that those who control the technology and data also can disrupt our democracy. So the key questions of the 21st century are: how to keep the technological advantage and build digital security so that democracies prevail in competition with the authoritarian regimes. What is the best response to the competition between authoritarian and democratic capital? How to secure the development of new technologies based on democratic values? The shared democratic values of the free world, openness, transparency, and the protection of individual rights, form the ideological basis and set the rules that Estonia tends to brand also trusted connectivity, as Edward Lucas pointed out. And third, we need a strong deterrence, military as well as political. Unity among the allies, as pointed out by Christianis, a strong transatlantic bond and US engagement forms a backbone of this policy. History shows that negotiation and dialogue is often not sufficient with the authoritarian regimes. Safeguarding us from hostile regimes also demands military deterrence, and we know here in Estonia and Latvia this very well. NATO allies have strengthened its military posture in the eastern flank. Solid military presence of the US, UK, and Canada in Europe is of utmost importance. NATO's posture in the Baltic region and Estonia has grown much stronger since it was in 2014. This demonstrates the strength of transatlantic bond that Canada is present in Latvia, UK is present in Estonia, and we work together with our allies here. In conclusion, I'm a firm believer in the EU and transatlantic relations. In fact, Estonia is among the most pro-European nations. And there is no contradiction between being pro-NATO, pro-transatlantic, and pro-European. Therefore, let us nurture the Atlantic community with democratic governments on both shores. Let us unite the common strategic objectives, and by the commitment to an open economic and democratic political system, it has all benefited us, so let's keep it strong. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Kaya, for that. And I'm aware that we are now, at the time this session should have already finished, but we are going to try and, I think we'll have a few minutes of discussion first before we go on to the UN Secretary General, who is joining us with a pre-recorded video. But let me pick up on the China question, because although we talk a lot about Baltic unity, and it's certainly true the Baltic states cooperate more than they've ever done in their history, we do see quite different policies on China, with the Lithuanians taking a very tough stance on both formally leaving the 16+1 and with their proposal to open a Taiwan office in Vilnius. And that's a distinctive policy. It's attracted a lot of attention in the United States, mainly favorable, and a great deal of attention in China, entirely unfavorable. And then we see your country, Prime Minister Kallas, saying that you're going to stay in the 17+1, which is now 16+1, but at the minimum level. And Latvia, perhaps not saying anything publicly, but perhaps you'd like to give us some guidance to your thinking now, Prime Minister. What's Latvia's policy on China and the 17+1 or 16+1?
Our policy on China is 27+1. That's the nutshell. We're not interested in the other formats so much. 27+1 is the direction we need to go.
And there's a bit of a paradox in this, because if it comes to 27+1 dealing with Russia, then we're not so happy. I think Prime Minister Kallas, when the EU tried to have a 27+1 summit with Russia, you and some other countries kicked up a bit of an objection to that.
No, but that was because Europe had agreed in 2014, when Ukraine happened, that we're not going to have summit, 27+1 summit, a very high-level summit, before Russia has fulfilled certain conditions. For example, stop the aggression in the Ukraine, give back Crimea. So if Russia hasn't done all these steps, and we say that, okay, let's have this meeting, then what signal we give out is that, our word doesn't really matter. And also that, you can just move forward, and everything you have done in Ukraine is forgotten. And for us, I think it just sends a very wrong message to our Eastern partners. And I'm not against in having dialogues with Russia, but the question was whether the conditions have been met, and if they have not been met, then Europe would have just looked ridiculous to have this kind of high-level meeting, because all the questions from you would have been also that, okay, what has changed? Nothing. So why do you move towards?
I know there was a great deal of gratitude in Ukraine for the stance that you and the other allies took in standing up to this Franco-German steamroller, and I'm sure if there were Ukrainians here, they'd be clapping you for that. Let me turn to the Biden administration next, because we obviously went through some very difficult years with the Trump administration and some very tough talk about how NATO was obsolete, and of course President Macron echoing that by saying NATO was brain dead. And there were really big questions about the future of the transatlantic relationship. But I think some of the expectations in Europe about Biden have been disappointed, and some of the expectations in the Biden administration about Europe have been disappointed. So the honeymoon, if there ever was one, is definitely over. Prime Minister Christian, what would you like to see from the United States to further strengthen the transatlantic relationship, and what can Latvia do from its end to contribute to that?
First of all, I have to say that from our country's point of view, the U.S. stance towards the Baltics, also during the Trump administration, did not change for the worse by any degree. If anything, you could say that there has been increased U.S. presence and investment in the area of defense in our region. So this is something that we note, and note very, very positively. What seems to be changing, though, is that, I also, as a politician, I've been in politics, I realized today, for 19 years. It's a rather long time. And even during these 19 years, the world has been continually changing. There was a point where the US was the single sole economic and military power in the world after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But that reality has changed. And I could say, as a Latvian and as a European, actually the US needs allies as much as we need the US as an ally. To address the challenges with Russia, to address the challenges with China, it's not enough for one. You really need the two. The two large democratic, freedom-loving blocs need to unite more strongly to put up an alternative to growing autocracy around the world. So in the Baltics, the US has been, in this entire region, including Poland, has been very strong. That's very highly appreciated. We don't see the stance there changing. And what the dismay of many with the Trump administration and the expectations that the Biden administration will bring about huge change, I think is misguided, because US internal politics is changing. There is no longer a complete consensus that the US is the policeman of the world. And I think that we have to understand that as the US changes, we need to change in Europe as well. And there I can agree with my French counterpart, that a stronger Europe within the alliance, that is something that is needed. So in a sense, we need to step up our game. And if very basic things, to finally invest the money in defense that we as NATO members have pledged. In the Baltics, we do this. Poland does this. Greece does this. But France, of course. But then I think the list becomes quite short after that. So there's a lot that we can do, and it's working together with, and the realization that actually these two blocs need each other and need to work together.
I'm going to come to you in a moment, Prime Minister, but I neglected to say that we have a hashtag for this conference, which is hashtag RigaConf 2021. So whether you're here in the audience or watching on the live stream, if there's something that you like, tweet it. If there's something you disagree with it, tweet that too. But let's keep the online discussion going as well for people who are following this on social media. Prime Minister Kallas, what's your take on my question?
Well, US is our ally, and of course what's happening in US internal politics is an issue of US internal politics. What is important for us is the pledge of NATO. And when we had the NATO summit in June, then Biden even stressed there that the only time the Article 5 was used was to the benefit of US or on the request of United States. So therefore he keeps this pledge and this promise as very important. And I think for our security here, this is definitely important. But it is also important what we do on our European side. So we have these discussions going on about the strategic autonomy. And as Christianis pointed out, if our armies are stronger, if we invest more in our security in every European army, then we are together stronger here as well. But if strengthening or building this strategic autonomy means building a separate line of command, then it could be very risky for countries like ours. Because in terms of crisis, you know, it's not that whether this is the European thing now or the NATO. So it has to be very clear how everything operates. And if we build this alternative, then I'm very, if it could actually undermine NATO. And the other thing, the signals that we send from our side as well, I think all these kind of disputes between our transatlantic allies make me a bit nervous in a sense that we are in this free world with the same values, and as you know, authoritarianism has been on the rise. We have to stick together. We don't have, I mean, we have the friends we have, and we can't push them away. And if we say that, you know, we don't need you anymore, then it might end in a place that is very, very lonely. And we have already been there. If you look at our history, we don't want to be there anymore.
Well, talking of loneliness, and I don't want to spend the entire I'm now told we have 20 minutes left, which is fantastic, and I hope that your schedulers were consulted with this, because they're going to have to do some adjustments, I think, but I'm following the instructions I have here. I think I can be excused as perhaps one of the very few British people in the room. I know there's one other, but he lives in the Netherlands. In just asking you a quick question about Brexit, because I think there were probably no countries in Europe that were more upset and worried by Brexit than the Baltic states, because of Britain's role not only with enhanced forward presence, but with our historic ties with Latvia and also Lithuania. And Brexit's done. It was, from my point of view, a disaster, and I was very upset about it. But can you just give me a quick take, both of you, on how Brexit's, do you see new opportunities arising for your relationship with Britain? Is Britain still here in the Baltics? Does it matter less or perhaps even more as a result? Prime Minister?
Of course, I don't want to comment on how unfortunate I think Brexit is. Oh, I just did. But regarding our relationship with Britain, it's as strong as ever, and it's an extremely important partner, both for trade and, of course, also for defense. Britain is and remains one of the strong NATO allies. They have a very strong presence in our northern neighbor, Estonia. We have an analogous presence of Canada in Latvia, and the Germans in Lithuania, and the US in Poland, in the enhanced forward presence within NATO. So this is a strong and vibrant relationship, and I'm sure the Brits will sort of sort themselves out.
Yes, well, we're certainly, that's, I think, would be fair to say, is a work in progress, but I'll pass that on to Boris Johnson. Kaya, we are now as important as Canada. That was my understanding of what the Prime Minister said. Is that right?
Well, I echo what my Latvian colleague says. Brits are very good friends and allies. So we have the biggest British presence in Estonia in our NATO forces, and we are very grateful for this. So we continue our relationship as well as we can, and hope that actually everything that is happening in the UK, you see that actually we want to go back to the European Union, so we are welcome.
Thank you. In my dreams. Now I want to turn to this question that you touched on, Kaya, directly, and also you, Prime Minister, in the about democratic decay, because I've been really struck by how one of the effects of the COVID crisis has been to turbocharge this belief in hoaxes and conspiracy theories, not only in terms of what the Chinese are pushing, that this was that COVID came from some bioweapons lab in China, or the Russians saying it came from the Lugar Center in Georgia, but more generally, this sort of vaccine skepticism, these crazy anti-vaccine theories. And it seems to me this goes way beyond just the medical questions. This is an attack on the whole idea, on the truth and the trust that underpin our whole system. And I'm not sure we have an answer to that. We've seen some discussion of regulation. There's the pressure on Facebook, which is obviously great. We've seen a few tweaks here and there. But would you agree with me, Prime Minister, that this exposes really a systemic challenge to the way in which our democracy and rule of law operate? And do you have any answers that we should be adopting either at a national or an international level to try and deal with it?
I wish I had the answers, but it's clear that any crisis, it's like in the winter in Latvia. If it goes down to minus 30 degrees, all of a sudden water mains start to break. And it's because when it gets so cold and as the frost moves through the soil, it exposes the lines that are not dug deep enough, and they break. This crisis also is showing the weaknesses that we have in our society. And it's the technology that we all love. I've forgotten what it was like not to have a smartphone and to use this application at conferences like this. To get news and to get information and to communicate. We can call each other anytime, send messages, and it's so convenient. But when I came into politics, if you wanted to get a message across, you went to one or two newspapers, one or two televisions, and you covered the entire country, because everyone watched the evening news. Everyone read either this daily, or if you didn't like that, you read the other daily. Now, if I want to get a message out, I still have to go to the same newspapers and television channels, but then I have to go through all the different social media trying to get people because they're fragmented. And before, as consumers of information, we consumed edited material. So you've had a little bit of experience in this field, and an idea which has been vetted through an organized system has a degree of veracity that's good. Now, I write whatever I want to write. I create my own little account. I get people to follow me, and I realize the crazier things I say. And this is our weakness in democracy right now.
Kaya, go ahead.
Well, I think it was even over 5 years ago, there was a very good book written called The Red Web. I don't remember the authors, but the authors were they were Russian journalists. And so it was part of how Russia also operates in web. And even already then, they were writing that when the Ukraine crisis was there, everybody expected that they're going to have same attacks as they were attacking us, the DDoS attacks, but they didn't. What they did was really undermine the truth so that you could get a small lie into Guardian. So it was published there, and then it was spread everywhere, and everybody was already pointing that, it was in the Guardian. So, everybody believed this. And so what it eventually does is that it undermines the truth and the trust. What can you really trust? And you doubt in everything. And now we come to these times of crisis, and it clearly shows that this undermining the truth in every way works against us, because people don't know what to believe, what to trust. And if it is so, then it's very hard to make the decisions and also to bring the people on board. And we fight this all the time, that I'm surprised that nobody believes this, but they do. They do believe this. So it's a question of education, I guess, but it's a broader question that we can't solve here.
I'm getting strict instructions that time is now up, but Prime Minister...
This is what I wanted to comment on. So here there's a feed from Anonymous saying ministers have to go, time is up. Is this true?
Yes.
Is this someone trying to get rid of us?
I was just that.
Who is Anonymous?
Well, at least
this is a great example.
At least it's not
there was a very interesting question that I wanted to answer, and then it went away. It says ministers have to go.
Well, I for one, welcome the admonitions of our new digital overlords. But Kaya, thank you so much for highlighting that book, Red Web. I just want to say that's by two dear friends of mine, Andrei Soldatov and Irina Borogan. And guess what? They're living in London now, like so many others. And if I could just say one thing, please do make welcome those brave Russians who are now having to live in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, wherever. There's so many Russians now fleeing the country without much money, with their jobs in tatters, their families in upheaval. And I think every one of us here in this room knows this, and anything we can do for this new wave of refugees from Putin is really important. I want to thank the two Prime Ministers for being so easy to moderate, for obeying our anonymous digital instructions, for running their countries so smoothly, for sparing the time to be with us. They're going to leave. You're allowed to clap, but you're not allowed to stand up, because we're going straight over to a video message from the Secretary General of the United Nations. But for now, please join me in thanking the Prime Ministers.
I'm pleased to address this year's Rīga conference, a unique platform for constructive dialogue on peace and security. Exactly 30 years ago, Latvia and its Baltic neighbors, Estonia and Lithuania, joined the United Nations. As Secretary General, I take inspiration from the strength of our partnership and your commitment to multilateralism. Today, this commitment is more valuable than ever. Multilateralism is essential to promote efforts for diffusing regional tensions, countering terrorism, confronting cyber threats, addressing pandemic and climate risks, and so much more. But let's be frank, our multilateral system is too limited, and its instruments and capacities are too focused on the short term. We need to strengthen global governance, and we need a United Nations fit to address the challenges of the future. That is why I presented my report on our common agenda, my vision for a reinvigorated, inclusive, networked and effective multilateralism. Anchored in respect for human rights, it outlines measures to invest in prevention and peace building by addressing the root causes of conflict. Increase support for regional initiatives to fill gaps in the global peace and security architecture and place women and girls at the center of security policy. In the face of persistent security concerns and geopolitical divides, the European region needs more mutual engagement and understanding. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the global security landscape was deteriorating. Today, we must act with urgency, foresight and purpose to address our shared concerns, and we must do so together. The challenges we confront demand nothing less, and I thank you.
Well, that was, if you didn't realize, that was Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, joining us remotely. And I now believe that I've got Edgar Zimkiewicz somewhere is going to come and give us his thoughts on the past years of Latvia's membership of the United Nations. But I don't see Edgar's anywhere, so I'm just talk naturally among yourselves for a moment, and perhaps Edgar's will appear.
Mr. Zimkiewicz, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that you agreed to this interview. Let's start a little bit about history. 30 years ago, when Latvia joined UN, what do you think was that decisive factor why we were admitted to this organization?
Well, I think that's a very easy question to answer, because the decisive factor was that the Republic of Latvia regained its independence after 50 years of occupation. Of course, the fact that the Soviet Union collapsed, that international community very quickly recognized the regained independence of the Republic, was a decisive one. I've seen some memoirs of diplomats and politicians of the time who were actually describing how difficult, prior to coup d'etat in August 1991, it was to knock on the doors of foreign ministries, chancelleries of presidents and prime ministers of the Western countries, reminding about the fact that Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania were independent countries occupied by Soviet Union, and the fact that those countries, the people of those countries, deserve their rightful place in all the international organizations. There was a very famous episode back in 1990 when there was a summit in Paris on European security, and then all three Baltic foreign ministers were asked to leave because then the Soviet delegation protested our presence. It was less than 1 year later that, due to some historic developments, all three Baltic states were raising their flags in New York, and they returned to the organization. I would say returned, because we were part of the League of Nations that was the kind of predecessor of the United Nations before the World War II. They returned to the international community. They took the rightful place that belonged to them, to us, and that we were deprived, not because we were willing to sacrifice our independence or our liberty. So I think it was just, in one sentence, it was the kind of restoration of historic right and justice.
And during these 30 years, what is the specific element we can add to this very big organization which consists of many countries of the world?
Well, each and every country is very unique. And each and every country of the United Nations have their own history, their own national traditions, their own understanding of what are the priorities in the world. But I think that throughout those 30 years, the fact that Latvia, along with Estonia and Lithuania, was able to restore its independence peacefully, that even in very dark period of 50 years of the occupation, there were people who were demanding and knocking on the doors of many of foreign ministries, going into demonstrations. Also, by the way, in New York, in front of the United Nations. And we are also celebrating not only 30th anniversary of being admitted in the United Nations, but also 50 years since the Baltic Appeal to the United Nations was formed. And that was the moment where all three representatives of all three Baltic states were demanding the restoration of historic justice. I think this unique situation where we have been able to show that justice ultimately prevails is one thing that makes us, along with our Estonian and Lithuanian friends, unique. Nowadays, of course, we are very active UN member. We are very much concentrating on universal human rights and values. We are well known for at least two very distinct policies. One is gender equality and women's rights. And second is we are always advocating for media freedom, but of course in today's situation also fight against what we call now infodemia, that's fake news, information warfare. We have been very active promoting that in different UN bodies, and the recent achievement, I would say, was that the resolution that was adopted by UN General Assembly on media literacy, that was prepared and co-sponsored by Latvia and Australia, was really getting a very huge support. Finally, we are bidding for UN Security Council. We are now a member of ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and here, of course, we are bringing what we are very famous for: digital technologies, and also the fact that we are a rather green country that is also advocating green economy, new technologies that help to fight climate change.
So these are the main issues we would like to raise if we would be the part of Security Council.
Indeed, regardless what the outcome of that vote in 2025 is, those are our top priorities when it comes to our work and activities in the United Nations. Those issues were underlined by President of Latvia, Mr. Levits, when he addressed UN General Assembly earlier this year in September. And we will continue working with like-minded nations in United Nations, in regional organizations to promote those three priorities. But definitely that's also our kind of landmark priority list, also bidding for UN Security Council seat for the period of 2026-2027.
And how about foreign issues? I would imagine that Ukraine would like us to stand for its needs also in Security Council.
That's part of what I'm referring to, our unique experience of justice and the prevalence of the international law. By the way, when we are talking with our friends from Ukraine, when we are talking with our friends from all around the world, and there is this huge issue of the illegal occupation and annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation, we keep reminding them, and also there have been many so-called side events, be it OSCE or UN or the Council of Europe meetings, where the example of the Baltic states, the non-recognition of the occupation of the Baltic states, the international community reminding about this fact, and also not following this kind of principle that the might makes the right. It's a different thing. The right makes might. We do believe that also our experience, our historic, let's say, background, is also helpful to Ukraine and Crimea. Yes, indeed, the non-recognition of Crimea, the current situation seems to be rather cemented. But we know that if you keep insisting that this is not right, that if there is constant attention to such kind of violations of international law, then ultimately things are going to change.
Yes, if we continue about Security Council, there have been talks about reforms in this in the council, as we know that there are countries which very often use veto, and basically a lot of decisions become in a deadlock situation. We know Russia-China attitude towards many conflicts in the world. Do you agree that some changes would be needed in Security Council?
Latvia has been supporting the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Actually, two elements in this. One, what you've just referred, and we have been also supporting some of our friends around the world that have been proposing that when it comes to the gross violation of human rights, look at Syria, look at Ukraine to some extent on what is happening in the Crimea. Then all permanent UN Security Council members should refrain from using veto, because human rights violations must get a very strong and swift counter-reaction by international community. The fact that UN Security Council has been paralyzed in the past and actually in the present in many of those instances actually undermines the credibility of the whole organization. It also actually aggravates the situation on the ground, and the only people who are really suffering are those who are on the ground. That's one part, and that should be one part of the reform. Unfortunately, we see that not always this kind of principle of not using veto when the situation is bad regarding human rights is being observed. The second, UN Security Council reflects the reality of 1945, the end of the World War II. We are living in the 21st century. There are already geographical disparities. We do believe that UN Security Council needs to be expanded, both when it comes to permanent and non-permanent member states. We do believe that Africa needs to be represented in UN Security Council, both as at least one seat in the permanent seat category and also in the non-permanent seat category. The same applies to Latin America, the same applies to the Asian continent. And also we believe that Eastern European group needs to be getting an extra seat in what is called non-permanent member states category. We do believe that there is going to be long debate. There is already long debate. It's not a kind of brand new thing to discuss. But we also believe that if there is no meaningful Security Council reform in observable future, then unfortunately the erosion of the organization is a very, very likely prospect.
Mr. Mr. Rikevich, thank you so much. I wish you a very fruitful Riga conference and also all the best luck in your future work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.